This week we're going to cover something called Tiferet. Tiferet is one of those Hebrew words that has a number of different translations, and the reason why it's got different translations is because it gets used in different contexts. So some will say Tiferet is the third of these three middle Sefirot. We've got Chochmah bin Adas being the top three. They are the three Sefirot of intellectual development. Chesed and Gvura were the two raw emotions. Chesed being the emotion of give, and Gvura being the emotion of constraint. And we'll reapply those and explore them once again today. And then Tiferet is balance. Now, balance would mean that it's a balance of the two. It's true that Tiferet is a balance, but it's so much more than a balance. There's only one word which I've seen in context of Tiferet which is incorrect, and that is compromise. Some will say Tiferet is a compromise, and once I define Tiferet, we're going to actually see that compromise is almost the opposite of what Tiferet is. Compromise is a very negative term. When I think compromise, I think of what the world are trying to achieve in the Middle East. They're trying to get a compromise between the Jews and the Arabs. They're trying to get a compromise between the Shiites and Muslims. They're trying to get a compromise in the different Arab Springs. And what is a compromise? A compromise is, I'll go home and hate you, you go home and hate me, but at least we agree not to shoot each other. So we're that far from killing each other, but the compromise is we won't kill each other. That is hardly a state of achievement. Fine, it's the achievement of saving life. But if we're talking about 10 Sefirot, if we're talking about energies that create, that does not sound like a creation. That sounds like borderline destruction. So compromise is actually going to be dealt with in a negative way. I'm going to maintain for tonight that compromise is a last option, but it's definitely not a great thing. A compromise is always when two people have been fighting or arguing. Be as passive or be as gentle as you want, but ultimately a compromise is two losers. You don't have two winners in a compromise. Two winners look at each other as both being winners, and they say, we are one, we are winners. A winning team are many people who all thought they won together. Anything short of that is not called winning, so compromise is not a win. But another word that people will use for Tiferet is beauty, and this is going to be a very interesting discussion as well. Now, beauty isn't so much a translation of Tiferet as much as the result of Tiferet. So when I say, if I would spill Tiferet on the table, I'd say, well, what is that? You would say, well, that's beauty. So therefore, it has become a translation. So we've got a number of different translations, a number of different contexts, and we're going to go through all of them tonight. We're going to try to explore each one for what it is, and actually see how it works on different levels. So Tiferet, let's go back 2 weeks. Let's go back to Chesed and Gvura. Let's re-explore them just for a moment, because we're going to actually take some of the analogies that we've used in the last 2 weeks, we're going to slash them. We're actually going to say those aren't good analogies, and we're going to bring them into Tiferet. Chesed. Chesed, we said, was give. Chesed is kindness, raw kindness, 100% kindness, unabated, without any interruption, without any inhibition. Just ultimate kindness is ultimate giving of oneself, sharing of what one has, without any thought. A person that naturally loves to give is a Baal Chesed, a master of kindness. Although they're not really a master at all, because a master is someone who's had to accomplish or achieve. They are a master. So it actually says, it's interesting, because a couple of weeks ago we said Abraham is the father of kindness. He is kindness embodied. And yet, in a lot of the commentary, no one really says that's so amazing. Although he is the symbol of kindness, no one will say that's so amazing. And the reason is because most commentaries say it was no big kunz for Avram to be kind. It was his natural disposition. If Avram's natural disposition was to hold on, if Avram's natural disposition was to be a miser, then it would be pretty amazing that he lived the lifestyle that he did, which was every single stranger that traveled past his tent was invited in for a meal, for wine, for bed, for free. Anyone, old, young, pretty, ugly, or pretty, or ugly, or pretty ugly, but all different, no matter who you were, you're welcome, angel or human. He brought everyone in, and he fed them, and everyone got the same treatment. And that was easy for him. He enjoyed it. So for someone to do what they enjoy, it's still a good thing. I don't want to belittle kind people. But there was so much more that Avram gets credit for things that he did, which went against his natural disposition. So we always look for where a person becomes a master. But a Baal Chesed, someone who is a kind person, like Avram, is always giving from themselves. They've got money, they share. They've got food, they share. My mother's a Baal Chesed. She almost every Sunday, she collects the Shabbos leftovers from the house, and she decides what she actually thinks I might eat or what my brother-in-law might eat. Then she halves that, and then she takes all the leftovers while they're still good, while they're still fit to be eaten by the family. And instead of giving it to the family, she drives down Carlisle Street and she drops it off to the various shelters and to the homeless people, Jews and non-Jews alike. And that's because her natural tendency is heavily weighted towards chesed. She gives. And then she'll take it a step further. After Purim, when we get all this junk food, the amount of rubbish people feel the need to give as a gift, the only people who should be giving such food are dentists. They're the only ones who are going to make back all this money. The amount of junk we'd get, and she takes it down. I remember once having an argument with her. I said, well, why you didn't give that to us as kids, why do you give it to the homeless? And she says, because it makes them happy. And the fact is, some of them have no idea what tomorrow will bring. So a hole in their tooth is really not the biggest issue in their life right now. Give them a bit of happiness with the lolly. Give them a piece of chocolate. You can't help everything, but you can at least put a smile on their face. And it's a very, very interesting idea that this chesed, just always finding a reason to give, a reason to share, and a reason to put on someone's face. There are many people that find that challenging.
You mentioned the Mi'ah, that was God created the world with chesed, you said?
Yeah.
And you mentioned the interesting about I'm trying to remember, you said Gvura was the second there, or you mentioned the first in the beginning?
I'll touch on that again. Chesed is that give. Now, in context of biblical history and in context of the stories of the Torah, day one of creation was chesed. There wasn't, and then there was. In order to create, there has to be ultimate give. It can't be judged. It can't be weighted. You've just got to put in. Then you start focusing your energies. But you've first got to generate all that energy and have the outpouring. So day one was chesed. And it was so much chesed that opposites coexisted. Light and dark all just mixed together. Whatever that means, however you mix light and dark, but it somehow happened on day one, because the separation wouldn't happen till day two, when there were a whole lot of separations. The separation of light and dark, the separation of the higher and the lower. But separation brings us to what we're talking about now, which is Gvura. Gvura is strength. Gvura is the ability to retain, the ability to whittle away, the ability to hold back. So everything after the first step of creation was actually a process of whittling. Hashem put in all that energy and then whittle it away, give things form, give things definition, lock things in. They will never be more than what they are. A human will always be a human will never be able to change to be anything else. An animal will never change to become anything else. They will always be locked in. Gvura is this state of retention. And the way it works in context of the energy flow of life, it ensures that everything remains the way they are. Gevura ensures that our soul remains in our body. If the soul could act in a form of chesed, it'd be out of here in no time. It'd say, why would I want to be locked in to this mundane, physical, limited place if I could be part of the grand bonfire that is in every other realm, beyond time and space, the ability to traverse infinite levels, the ability to grow and be part of the one. Why would it want to be locked in a place where reality actually denies the existence of a one? We have to believe in a one. We can't even be sure that there is a one. Why would the soul want to be there? And so chesed would just allow it to leap off and be a free spirit. Gvura says, nah, you're staying right where you are. Strength. You're staying right where you are. Gvura, we also used Yitzchak, the second of the forefathers, as our example of Gvura. Yitzchak never traveled. Yitzchak stayed within Israel his whole life. He was born in the borders of Israel and he died in the borders of Israel. Never traveled to Egypt, didn't do all that traveling business, didn't reach out to people, made peace treaties. And a peace treaty is a symbol of by digging wells. What did he do? He said, right, here's your water, here's my water. Let's agree to keep away from each other. This is my territory, that's your territory, that's good. So Yitzchak was all about his own space, raising his family, looking after the finances. We know that based on a number of different Hasidic interpretations. In fact, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe, writes that Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov were Nishkan Oraman. They weren't poor people. You think of the forefathers of having long beards and no money. Not true. If you look at the stories, they go to war with different kings. Who's inviting them to a war with kings? Obviously, they had their own little empires. If you look at Rashi's commentary, Rashi, who lived 1,000 years ago, writes about how when Jacob went down to Egypt and sent his kids to Egypt to get food, it was because they were short of specific food types, but they had plenty of other luxuries of food. They just wanted to show, like everyone else is short of food, they didn't want to flaunt their wealth. So they also went to Egypt to buy certain import products like grain. But the truth is, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the forefathers, were actually very well-to-do, powerful business people, and very, very spiritual people at the same time. And yet Yitzchak chooses not to expand the empire, he chooses to consolidate, to stay in control, stay where he is, which is an act of gvura. None of this hispashtos, this outward, hyper way of living. He wouldn't have been the sort that would have been on front page of the Age. He would have been, probably not even, he would have been reading. I don't even know if he would read the Age, probably the Australian. He'd be reading the paper, he wouldn't be in the paper. Avram would have been front page stuff. He was there, he was mixing with the people, and he was a do-gooder, and he was chesed. He was out there. Yitzchak was shunning the cameras. That's the Gevura. Gevura we also spoke about in context is a person that is very insular, very, very contained, and can be quite a strict person in the way they live their life. Very, very literal with the interpretation of law, and very, very literal with how they interpret the law for others. But they're not just about being strict with others, they're actually quite strict on themselves. Which brings us to, and we're going to jump back to Chesed and Gevura a bit this evening, but we're going to jump into Tiferet. Tiferet is balance, as balance. When you think balance, there are a number of images that will come into people's minds. One image of balance is a scale. And a balanced scale has a weight on both sides that equally balances the two sides. As a kid, I don't know why, but I'm not a kid anymore, but I still think like this. When I think balance, I see a seesaw with two kids, perfectly balanced. Just perfect, you know? A scale, big whoop. But you try to get two kids to balance on a seesaw, that to me is achievement. That's balance. But that's not really what Tiferet is. Although Tiferet is the child product of Chesed and Gevura, it doesn't mean it's 50-50. Chesed and Gevura were day 1 and 2. Tiferet is day 3. What happened on day 3? If it was just balanced 50-50, it would take us back to day 1, where everything's mixed together, everything's equal, everything's the same. Day 1 was that. Day 2 was separation of land, of heaven and earth, separation of darkness and light. Day 3 is the formation of vegetation. Water and earth now has to separate from one another, but the combination of water with earth is fruit, vegetation. Without water, there's no vegetation. Without soil, classically, hydroponics aside, without soil, you've got no vegetation. So you need the two things that don't actually live together, they live separately, and play very different roles in order to produce vegetation. So day 3 is now an outgrowth of two things, which means chesed and gvura do not need to be mixed together. Each one must remain pure to themselves, and their byproduct will be this new third form of beauty. It will not be a two-face. It will not be a he-she. It will not be a hermaphrodite. It will not be the best of everything. It will be the best of its own, a new kind. If you think of any child, no child is 50-50 of their parent. They have a lot of input of both, but at the end of the day, the child is an independent. The child is not physically connected to parents, and the child will develop its own emotions and its own feelings, its own opinions, and even its own look. It even has a slightly different DNA to its parents. Because when mum is pregnant and she gets a cold or she gets a virus and there is a slight mutation, child ends up with a slight mutation. New person who will pass on their own mutation to all their future kids, which their parents never passed on to them. So although they are from the same place, they are something of their own. So Tiferet is not a hybrid. Tiferet is its own product. So that's why in our Sefirot tree, Tiferet still gets its own circle. But where is its circle? It is between and below Chesed and Gvura.
So it's like the child that came from
It is the child. It's a bit very much like Das is the child of Chachma and Bina. The only difference is Chesed and Gvura need to mix together to get Chesed and Gvura need to mix together to get Tiferet. For us to get to Das, Chachma has to go through Bina to get to Das. So in that family tree, you have the male that must put in and approach the female, so to speak. The female, Bina doesn't, this is where the moshel goes wrong, but the Bina can't be achieved if there wasn't a prior Chachma. You can't, well, you can run before you walk, but you can't have anything if you don't have matter. So you can't be a craftsman who works on wood if you haven't been given wood. So all your craft is worth nothing. It doesn't exist without wood. So without Chachma, you don't have Bina. But the process of Chachma through Bina equals Das. But that's not for tonight. Chesed and Gvura come together to produce this Tiferet. But Tiferet can be weighted. Balance doesn't necessarily mean equal. If you look at this term, balanced journalism, which is usually imbalanced journalism, but balanced to which side? It's like center politics. Like now in France, they've got a they had a centrist government, and now they've got a centrist government. One was center right and one center left. It's not center at all, but it is. Why do we call it center? Because you're allowed to be centered and still weighted to one side more than the other. So Tiferet can also be weighted from one side to the other. Sometimes Tiferet on our sliding scale can be heavily closer to Chesed, but it's still got an element of Gvura, and I'm going to give you some very obvious metaphors and analogies. And sometimes Tiferet can be heavily weighted towards Gvura, depending on what's appropriate. Last class we spoke about Gvura being din, judgment. Very harsh, very cold, very unemotional. And we spoke about Gvura is the ability to sentence, lock someone up in prison. But that's not really true. Because if a judge, every week I've kind of dispelled what I've said the week before, but that's cool because at the time it was true. It had its place. But in truth, no judge, you don't want a judge that's 100% Gvura. If you have a judge that has 100% Gvura, it'll be like the Queen of Hearts. What does the Queen of Hearts keep telling Alice? Alice is watching. What's she saying non-stop? Off with their heads! Off with it! For what? A dirty card. Off with his head. Everything is off with the head in Alice in Wonderland. That's Gvura. That's just... a 5-year-old is brought to the children's court. Let me go, let me go, let me go. And then the judge peers down, looks through his half-rimmed glasses and says, now lad, what have you done wrong? And he says, I stole a lolly, an Atlas chewing gum. I don't know if they still exist, but when I was in school, we used to go to 7-Eleven and get Atlas chewing gums for 2 cents or 5 cents or something. It sounds like the stories of my parents. When they were young, you couldn't get anything for 5 cents. You had to get 10 things for 5 cents because they were worth so little. So the child steals a 5-cent chewing gum. What does the judge say? Well,
give me one too.
You're going to have to lose your head because we don't allow stealing in this country, and kills the child. That's Gvura. That's Gvura. Complete severity without any magic word? Compassion. So Tiferet is sometimes translated as compassion. Because what is compassion? Compassion means I've still got Gvura, but despite the Gvura, I'm going to employ Chesed. Compassion is the judge says, well, you've committed a crime, little boy. However, your tears move me. And therefore I won't kill you. I'm just going to tell your parents to give you a rap on the knuckles and you can go home. Compassion is despite the fact that you've committed a crime and I should punish you, I've got a sympathetic, empathetic side that tells me don't do it. Bring it back to Chesed. Let him go. But Gvura says don't let him go completely because then he'll never learn. So punish him a little bit. And that's how we have a whole sentencing structure in any legal system. Very few legal systems, if any, have either innocent and guilty. All guilt punished with one punishment, all innocent scot-free. You have a whole lot of middle grounds depending on what the crime that's been committed. So compassion is actually what Tiferet says, and compassion slides. Compassion can be stronger, weighted to Chesed. Sometimes it's just a little bit of Chesed. Compassion is actually what Tiferet is. It's a sliding scale. So Yaakov, coming back to the three forefathers, not three of the four, three forefathers, Yaakov is somehow this mix of Chesed and Gevura. But is he called Avtzchak? Is he a real mix of Avraham and Yitzchak? Not at all. He's Yaakov. He's his own man. He actually looks like his grandfather, he looks like his father, and behaves like both. Yaakov doesn't move, has all his wives, stays there. And yet the beginning of his life was traveling all over the place. He's living here, and then he goes to his uncle Lavan, and then he marries the girls, and then he moves back home, and then he stays put, and then he moves to Egypt. Says he like Yitzchak, that he likes to stay put, because wherever he goes, he stays put, but then he moves again. So he's got this staying power of Yitzchak, but he's got the giddy of Avram that has always got to be on the move, always checking out new borders, new frontiers. And he has all these kids. But there's a difference between his kids and his brother and his uncle. And his grandfather's kids. And that is, Avram has 2 sons, Yitzchak and Yishmael. Yitzchak buys in, Yishmael says, it's not for me. Yitzchak says, yes, I'm a monotheist that chooses to live my life just like my father. I will emulate my father. And he's the apple of his father's eye. Yishmael, bit of a rogue. His father has to throw him out due to family pressures at home from Sarah. And Yishmael does not adopt the same way of living as Avraham. Yitzchak has 2 kids as well, Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov is apple of his father's eye, emulates his father's ways, lives up to the family spiritual thing. And his brother Esav, quite the contrary, loves to kill, loves to hunt, loves women, but only for a day or two. He's all over the place. He's an animal. He's a beast. He's got red skin. He's hairy. He kills. He loves life. He's doing idolatry. He's doing monotheism. He's dabbling in everything. But he's not his father's son. That's for sure. You wouldn't have said, like father, like son. You wouldn't. But on the other hand, you would. You'd say such a determined young man. so focused, so rebellious, has got to come from a very strong nature. So what do we see? That the two extreme parents, Avram being an extreme chesed, only gets a 50% success rate. In fact, not even. Because Avram has all these other kids that didn't make it, as in didn't live up to what their father wanted them to be. They were, I'm sure, great kids, because when he dies, he includes them in his will.
Which one are you talking
about? Avram has a whole lot of kids. Now, we don't actually know their names, but we know they existed because Avraham, before he dies, gives them gifts and sends them eastward. And this has always been a very, very interesting discussion where eastward is. East of Israel is the east, it's the Far East. So when he sends them there with these gifts, the question is, well, he gave them money. We need to know that he gave them money. I mean, that's so important. And obviously, it wasn't just money, it was knowledge. Avram imparted with them spiritual knowledge, but said, please, take all your stuff that you're into and keep it away from my son Yitzchak. Here's a monotheist, here's a purist, he's going to live here, I'm giving you your Yerusha, I'm giving you your inheritance, but you've got to take it and play down there. And they go eastward, which is, if you look at the timing, it's awfully uncanny. It's the early days of Indian and Chinese spirituality. And anyway, that's not for tonight. But he hasn't got a great success rate. Success meaning, I want my child to be what I want them to be, and the child rebels. So we see extremism from Avram's part isn't successful. Yitzchak is also an extremist. He's a very tough sort of guy. He goes to war, he makes peace treaties, and don't talk to me. Obviously, really was quite a determined, focused individual. Heavy into academia, very learned individual, very patriotic to the land, never leaves Israel, and he too has children of two extremes. It's just very hard for this very, very extreme type of parent to relate to the children, and for the children to relate back, and therefore he has relative success. Success, again, being defined against what Yitzchak would have wanted from his kids. It's not for me to judge who's successful and who's not. But then you get Yaakov. He doesn't have 2 kids. He has like 12 kids. And that's the 12 sons that we know of. Then there are the daughters. This guy is just putting them out like rabbits. He's got 4 wives, and every kid thinks that they are their father's favorite son. Every kid thinks they are God's gift to humanity. To the point that Joseph really does think is God's gift to humanity. He must have got that at home. He has these dreams. His father doesn't whip him. His father says, these are amazing dreams. I'm very excited by this notion of all of us bowing down to you one day. You keep dreaming, young man. And then you got Judah, who's an absolute brute of a boy. He's very tough. And yet he defends his father like the world depends on it. And then you've got Reuben and Shimon and Levi, who when their sisters kidnap, that's it, they murder a whole town. Do not kidnap or rape our sister, you will cop it. This family unit is very, very tight. Something that these parents did was not done by the 2 previous generations. That is that Yaakov was a balance. He had the chesed, he had the gvura, but he didn't dabble in each. He combined them to be his own personality, and therefore was able to relate to each child. He was able to slide backwards and forwards, relating to each child according to the child's needs, as opposed to bringing them up to be just like him. Both are correct parenting. Both have their pros and cons. And so Yaakov ends up with what we call a relative 100% success rate, because every kid lives up to what Yaakov wants his kids to be. So Tiferet is perfection. Tiferet is beauty. Because what is beauty? In the eyes of the beholder. I can't define beauty. I'm not a great linguist, but also, truth is, who can define beauty? Modern art has proven to us that no one knows what beauty is. One person loves a blank canvas, the other one says it's blank. One loves to see a whole lot of random brush strokes, the other one sees detail and unbelievable creativity. Art is not beautiful, and yet all art is beautiful, because it varies according to what you are. Beauty, ultimately, is when you're able to see a collection and appreciate. So in truth, beauty is only there if you appreciate it. If you don't, I'll give you an example. In Maimonides, in Rambam, there's an interesting halachic discussion about whether on Shabbat women can wear chokers. Because if you wear a choker too tight, it cuts in, and all sorts of different, not cuts in hurting you, but it makes marks and it could break, a whole lot of different halachic outcomes. But who cares about that? The question is, why are women wearing these chokers? You know, what's so good about that? And if you look at it, when Rambam lived in Egypt in 900 years ago, back then, being overweight was beautiful, because overweight meant you had food. Having food meant you had money. Money was beautiful in the eyes of most people. And therefore, the psyche of people was that chubbier is more beautiful. Today, we live in a disaster zone where it's like poverty is beautiful. Don't have food, you're beautiful. I'm not quite sure where people get off with that. I think, but then again, is it really beautiful? When I don't want to be judgmental, especially coming from a male, but when a woman, when I can put my thumb and my pinky around a woman's waist, is that really beautiful? I personally don't think so. And yet media has convinced us, convinced many, to believe that that's beautiful, to the point that people actually think they look beautiful and look ugly, unfortunately, if they don't achieve that. And back then, not media, but public sway made people appreciate a more robust woman, which was fantastic. Fantastic that people are a little more sensible. So that's why Maimonides has that discussion. So,
in terms of music,
yeah.
if you talk about beauty, or it's more like harmony, it's balance, and I would say like one word is pleasing.
So harmony.
Music that can be really like bombastic. Pleasing, it makes you feel, elated, like very balanced, the harmony is very balanced.
So beauty is when you can appreciate, and appreciation is beauty. So Tiferet is beauty. Tiferet is when you can appreciate, and you can appreciate a number of different things. A food with many flavors can be appreciated, even though you watch MasterChef and he says, I just love the way you've got that chili and the sugar and then the caramel followed by the pepper, followed by that bitterness. Oh, that's what you've got there is divine. Well, that makes no sense. They're most opposing flavors, and yet the layers. Oh, come here, boys. And they go and get all into it. Tiferet is the ability to tap into the different angles and appreciate it. So Tiferet is never extreme. Tiferet can move in its controlled way. So the judge actually does not use Gevurah at all. The judge adopts a position of Gevurah as well as a position of Chesed in their Tiferet way of living. And that changes. So Tiferet is actually this balance. It's a harmony. Day 3 of existence wasn't about mixing light and day and saying, here we have grey. Light and darkness, here we have grey. Mix black and white, you get grey. That's not harmony. Harmony is sometimes giving everything its space and yet it all complements one another. Harmony might be where you take a whole lot of different coloured paints and you just put a bit of a swirl, letting every colour be itself, but yet within this swirl. So the harmony is actually, if you look at the back of my business card, my card, everyone here has a different quote on the back of the card, that nurturing something like beauty is, love is nurturing the other person's differentness. You've got to know, difference is what's beautiful. You don't want everything to be the same. So the harmony of different types is actually true beauty. Now, I'm going to do some number games because we haven't tapped into too much Gematria.
What was day 3?
So day 3 was water and land coexisting to be able to produce vegetation and life on the earth. So it wasn't mixing them together, which would be the bottom of the ocean. It was actually landmass, moderation of each. And cactus needs so much water, and then tomatoes need so much water. Some need a lot of soil, some need less soil, but each will bear a new entity. Now, I do like numbers. So I looked up some really cool gematrias for tonight. Now, gematria is spiritual mathematics. Gematria can't just be done by an ordinary person. Gematria actually falls within the realm of Sod. Sod, which is, if there are 4 levels of learning, Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. Pshat being surface level, Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning God created. There is nothing to discuss there. Pshat is, right, if you walked out with the Pshat of the first verse of the Torah, what does Pshat tell me? In the beginning God created. No, nothing deeper there. Remez is what is indicated here. Why is it the order Bereshit bara, not bara Bereshit, created in the beginning? Remez will indicate by the formation of the words, I've got a better understanding. Drush is already a much deeper level, the allegorical. What I know this story happened, but what's the purpose of this story? What's the deeper meaning of this story? And then Sod is, if once you've gone all the way through and you start picking apart, and no longer are words, but rather just a collection of letters, and every letter is its own energy, what is the meaning of all this? Kabbalah falls within the realm of Sod. Sod is called secret. And it's not secret because you're not allowed to learn it till you're 40. I mean, that's nice. You can't learn Kabbalah till you're 40. But even if you open a Zohar when you're 40, you're still not going to understand anything. At least I know I won't, because I don't speak Aramaic. But also because it's been encoded. It's a bit like the most complicated maths I ever did was in year 11, year 12. I did maths methods, right? Math methods is like, I don't know, you walk into a grade 2 classroom and go, okay kids, today we're going to learn about hyperboles. And then you go, that's a funny word, can you say that again? Hyperbole. Now if you walk into a year 12 classroom and say, guys, hyperboles, everyone's going to go, oh no, please, not a term of hyperbole. Get real. Why? What's the difference between a grade 2 student and a year 12 student? The grade 2 student knows nothing. You tell them today you're going to learn 1 plus 1, they're going to go, oh my God, this is going to be so hard. 1 plus 1. And they're scratching their head. But they're at the early stages. You just say a word, hyperbole. It's like unbelievable thoughts fly through the mind, the tests, the graphs, the calculator, the pain, the 1 o'clock in the morning assignments. Hyperbole conjures up so much, and yet all he said was 1 word. He didn't say anything about that, the teacher. Sod, the Kabbalah, is written in code that once you know everything, every word is a fountain of information. So if you haven't done years 2 through year 11, you're not going to understand hyperbole. You can't, it's not about age, it's about knowledge. Generally, we say a person who has learnt for all their life, come to the age of 40, is ready to open these books and let their mind be absolutely flushed with this unbelievable knowledge. But so the reason why I mention that is because although people love playing with numbers, and you get things like the Bible code and all sorts of things, which I do say with this face, not because I'm saying it's not true, I'm just a little cynical of it. I believe in the concept of Bible code. I'm not sure if I believe books that are written with computer programs. And that's because the whole number system and the whole code of the Torah is so complex, and it's got such energies that it requires an intellectual mind to take it apart, not an algorithm, although it's pretty cool. The Tur, the Balaturim, lived 400 years ago, more, actually used to encourage his students to muck around with Gematriot, with numerical values, but he assured them that they're not coming up with any chidushim, you're not coming up with anything new, you're just sharpening your mind, because to really play with these spiritual algorithms, you've got to have a lot of prior spiritual knowledge to be able to play around. But this isn't mine. I got this from a book which I was reading, written by a Kabbalist in Israel, Rabbi Ginsburg, and this is what he writes, and it's again based on other texts. And that is that Tiferet's numerical value is 1081. Okay? 1081 is the sum of all the numbers between 1 and 46. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 blah, 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 blah.
1 and 46?
1 and 46. This is what he says. I hope he's right. because I haven't done this. At a certain point, you start believing what you read. It wasn't in a newspaper. It wasn't like a Wizard of Id. The sum of all numbers is 5. Okay, I saw it in the newspaper. Now, he actually also says that 46, which is the wholeness of all the numbers of 1 to 46, is the Gematria of Levi. And so the connection here between Tiferet and Levi is that Levi is, guess what? Child number 3 of father number 3, of Jacob. Levi was the 3rd son of Jacob, who is the embodiment of Tiferet. And what does Levi represent? Levi goes on to become the father of the tribe of Levi. Each son had a tribe and a family. And the tribe of Levi is a very, very curious tribe because it's actually split into 2 parts. Kohanim, the priests, and the Leviim, the Levites.
Same as Joseph.
But this is within one tribe as opposed to Joseph, which is 2 separate kids who are actually going to become 2 tribes sometimes. But Levi, the Kohanim and the Leviim are all brothers. And yet, depending if you came from this father or that father, both from Levi, you're part of the one tribe, you fly the one flag, you're considered ambassadors to the Jewish people in your divine service working in the Mishkan and the Beis Mikdash, and yet there are 2 parts. And guess what Kohen and Levi represent? This is great. Kohanim represent Chesed, and Leviim represent Gvura. Kohanim were all about doing things. They worked in the temple. They brought your sacrifices. You needed help, they were there to help you. Leviim were about cleaning up, tidying up, keeping the rosters right, ensuring that the services were on time. The Leviim held the Seder for the Beis Mikdash. They made sure things happened the way they should happen. There was an interesting balance between the Kohanim and the Leviim. And so the Leviim represent. So what is Levi? Levi must be made of both. And therefore he is the father of both the Kohanim and the Leviim. Now, the Kohanim and the Leviim, this is a very interesting dichotomy that exists throughout society. You've got holy people in this world. And what are most holy people? These beautiful spiritual individuals, mentors, masters, Kabbalists. What are they always surrounded with? Come on, be cynical.
People.
What sort of people? The immediate... Laurie, don't be so beautiful. They've always got disciples and fanatics and all that. But who are the people that control the office? Nasty people. The people who run the office are always nasty. They're the ones who, I can think of so many examples. You have some Kabbalists in Israel, they're beautiful people, one of the most famous Kabbalists, I'm not going to say his name because by definition I'll be bad-mouthing his sons, but there was one of the most amazing, most beautiful, most spiritual people in the last century. Lived in Morocco. The miracles attributed to him by the thousands, and the amount of followers and people that flocked to meet him and see him, and the things that he was able to talk about without ever being there. And yet, he was surrounded by corrupt individuals who controlled the people around him. If it was up to him, he would have helped everyone, but they limited who could come in. That's a bit nasty. But then you think about, I can think of stories, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, very, very special person. Very, very learned man. Very, very spiritual person. A person that people begged for blessing and just to speak for 5 seconds. And what was the Lubavitcher Rebbe surrounded with? A secretarial corps. A group of people that worked as his secretaries. And their job was to bring the mail in, send the mail out, and if people were spending too much time, the Rebbe wouldn't say, hey, I'm done with you now. As long as someone was talking to the Rebbe gave them eye contact. You could have been an absolute quack. The Rebbe would give you your time to say a piece and he'd respond, or he wouldn't respond, but he gave the time. I always say that one of the greatest achievements of the Rebbe was to make someone who spent 5 seconds with him feel like they had the whole world. And yet, if someone would call me, I go, look, I've got 5 seconds, make it quick. They would never want to talk to me again. So what's the difference between me and the Rebbe? When the Rebbe gave someone 5 seconds, they got 100% of him. When I give someone 5 seconds, they've got none of me. They've got my ear at best. So if you give someone 100% of yourself, even for 5 seconds, people appreciate it. If you can be totally in the moment, that there could be atomic wars around the world, but you want to talk to me, I'm 100% listening to you, it's an unbelievable achievement. And I think that touches people. I would say that was the Rebbe's success. One of the Rebbe's successes was to be able to be so caring, to be in the moment for every single person. Normal, abnormal, by our definitions. Never heard the Rebbe describe someone. In fact, I just saw a video on YouTube of a lady, and she's talking to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe has to repeat himself, and repeat himself, and repeat himself. And first it's in Hebrew, and then it's in English, and then it's in French. And you just want to say, hey lady, there are all these people that want this man's time. He's in his 80s. I mean, for God's sake, move on. And there's a woman, because the Rebbe also had, there were female secretaries that were in charge of just moving people along. And there's a woman like pulling her like, and she's like, stop it! In front of the Rebbe, stop it, leave me alone, what are you? And what does the Rebbe do? He doesn't go, okay, move her on. As soon as she turns around, he repeats himself to her, gives her the time. It's the secretaries that do the hard work of moving people along. So sometimes they're just nasty people because we call them nasty, even though they're just doing their job. And sometimes they really are nasty people. In the case of the secretaries around the Rebbe, actually everyone ended up loving these people. They're actually very, very special people, but they're doing their job, which is time management. So in the Bet HaMikdash, and in the Mishkan, you have the Kohanim. Their job is just do it. You need help, they're here to help you. The Leviim, though, got to keep the Seder. They've got to keep things moving. They've got to keep singing, stop the singing, move it on, close the doors, shut the gates, move the people, check on the people with leprosy, check on this, go with the Kohen. They've got work to do. So they are the Gevura. So Levi, which is 46, is really the culmination of 1081, which is Tiferet. Beautiful stuff. Beautiful. So what we've got so far in this series is we've got beauty, but not compromise, because remember, now you can understand why I'm so against compromise, because compromise is not beauty at all. If they manage, miraculously, to bring about world peace, starting in the Middle East, I wish I could say in my lifetime that we're going to see millions of Arabs and millions of Jews living within 100 square kilometers, not only not spitting each other, but going back to the days of when Muslims and Jews coexisted, not just coexisted, but they studied together and they lived together and they respected one another and they appreciated one another. I hope that happens in my lifetime, but that's not compromise. That's love. Compromise is when you build a wall and agree not to cross that wall. Compromise is the last, it's not Tiferet. Compromise is actually extreme Gevura. Extreme Gevura. I'm exercising Gevura, you're exercising Gevura. If I exercise one more amount of Gevura, I'm going to Gevura you. I will overcome you. I will be so strong with you. But right now, the only Gevura I'm exercising is self-restraint. So what's going on there is actually pure Gevura. Tiferet is beauty, harmony. When we talk about Mashiach coming, we talk about Tiferet. This beautiful balance and coexistence and appreciation of difference. There was one other thing. Beauty, balance, new entity. Don't remember. Anyway, so there's so much on Tiferet. So now what? Let's go back to where Moshe began with Chochmah bin Adas and now Chesed Gvur Tiferet. Chochmah bin Adas is Chochmah is wisdom. You have this moment of this spark. You're standing in the shower, the first of the Sefirot. You're standing in the shower. The steam's getting to you. It's all very, very, very hazy in there, and suddenly an idea. Oh my God. Oh my God, what an idea. And you just, oh my God, and there's a knock on the door. Is everything okay in there? It's like, yeah, everything's fine, but I've just had the most amazing idea. But you can't tell anyone what it is because you don't even know what your idea is. Binah is that development. Binah is now coming to the wisdom of it all. What is it? What is it that I'm thinking about? What is it that's getting me so excited? I think I see it clarifying now. I see it. Das is I know exactly what it is, but I've got nothing to show for it because all I've got is an unbelievable idea. I finished my brainstorm. Das is the end of the brainstorming session. It's when you've even done your SWOT analysis at the end of Das. You've taken into account your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, your threats. I've got this all worked out. I know exactly what I'm going to do. So what do? You begin. Chesed. You just go for it. You begin the process of fundraising or investment or however it is that you're going to finance this operation. Or it's the beginning to build. Chesed. But Gvura, not too much. Not too much. Let's not get carried away here. Gvura, I mean, we're gonna conquer Australia. We're not conquering the world here. Gvura is this idea, don't let it get out of control. Gvura is we don't need any more money. Gvura is we're just working on this project. You know, sometimes you get people who get very caught up. It's so exciting, we're going to do so many things. It's like, no, we're not. We're doing one thing, we're doing it well. So Gvura starts, no, that's enough. But you can't stop there. Then Tiferet is okay. We've got the energy going. We've defined it. Let's just carry on at a healthy pace with our one idea. The next few weeks is going to be exploring Netzach Hod Yesod, which are acts of refinement. They're refinement of character. So, for example, you're not ready to build anything yet with Chesed and Gvura. If you think about Chesed and Gvura, it is before you've started building, Chesed is you've got your hammer, and Chesed is ready. And Gvura is like, easy, just you'll swing, and Gvura is now defining how much energy before you've even started swinging. You know, if you think about it, if you meditate, all these thoughts actually go through your head before you do something. You know, who here doesn't like speaking in public? Okay, have you ever had to do it though?
A lot of times.
So you know that feeling, you step up to the mic and you count in your head 1, 2, 3, this whole thought process happens between 3 and the beginning of talking. It's when you go, and you're quickly moderating, okay, how is it going to go? How are it? That was a bit much. That was a bit too much chesed there. Gvura is like, you take that deep breath, and chesed is, okay, get ready. Gvura is not too much. Tiferet is, okay, just right. But you haven't got the right words yet. Netzach Hod Yesod will be which words come out. Chachma bin Adas is what I want to say. Chesed Gvura Tiferet is, I've taken that last breath and the voice is coming up. It's coming up. It's passing through the voice box. And now what words? Netzach Hod Yesod, refinement. Malchus, delivery. So these are all processes. They're nanoseconds, and yet each step of this nanosecond has a name. And this is the truth in when you build and when you create. This is the truth when you speak, because they're all forms of creation. And these are also the processes of creation if you look at the day. So what's the next day? So day 1, exist. Day 2, separate. Day 3, basic construction. Let plants grow. Next are going to come animals, birds. Just say animals. Who cares where they fly or slither? But all of a sudden we're starting to get refinement. Birds in the sky, fish in the sea, insects, animals on the land. And we're going to keep refining humans. It's humans, they're animals. They walk on the land. Why all of a sudden this extra definition? It's a further form of refinement. And then what happens? The end of creation. And at the end of the day, Hashem came to rest and it was all done. And guess what happened on Sunday? After Adam and Eve got chucked out of the Garden of Eden. It all began again. All the animals start filing, but on a smaller level. All the animals start walking past Adam. And Adam has to go, ooh, you're a lion, are you? But no one ever created lions. Hashem had created animals. The word aryeh isn't in the first 7 days of creation. Hashem created animals and the potential for everything. And now every animal has to file past and Adam has to go, you've got the energy of an aleph, but yet you've got that strength of being absolutely anything of a yud. You've got the ferocity of a resh. I'm making this up as I go. You've got the spelling is the only thing I'm telling the truth here. You've got the this of the hey. You must be an aryeh. So there's this chachma bin adas, an understanding of what he's looking at, Chesed Gvura Tiferet tapping into the energy, and then the Malchus, yet again, of creating a name, a definition. So it constantly goes on. Everything we do. If you look at the process of creation, you plant a tree. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. Chesed, the seed, water it. Gvura, not too much. Tiferes, new product, bears fruit. And then what happens? The seeds, they get planted, they grow, and it's all a cycle that happens over and over again. But the cycle continues in another way. The lumberjack comes, Chesed, he's going to chop down the whole forest. Gvura is not too much. Chesed is going to just keep sawing. Gvura is use the right saw. Tiferes, load it on to, then there's a process of loading it onto the truck, and it goes to the factory, and then it'll be Chesed and Gvura again. It'll be refined and further refined and further refined until you get paper. And then paper, what are we going to do? Someone has to go, paper, what an interesting existence. Chochmah b'dadas, what's the thing I could use this for? I know, I'm going to print a book. Okay, Chesed, how big's my book? Gvura, not too big. Tiferes, how heavy? Netzach Yesod, what color the page? Is it going to be a pure white? Is it going to be an off-white? So everything goes through this process. Every thought, every time we do something, we are following these 10 Sefirot. So when we look at the original days of creation, macro. When you look at the forefathers, in person. And when you look at them as definitions, personality types. So what we're actually looking at here is everything. Personality and process of creation. So we've gone through Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, and they are considered the senior three of the emotions. Okay?
So who was the first person to come up with the 10 Sefirot?
You asked me Kabbalistic history. I off the bat, I have no idea. You see, I haven't learned enough Kabbalistic texts. Sefer Yetzirah is one of the oldest texts. Are the 10 Sefirot mentioned in there?
Yes.
Yes. So it already existed then. Who wrote Sefer Yetzirah? Arguably Abraham. Some say it has its roots with Adam. So it's an ancient text. So already right then, I would take a very safe gamble to say that Adam and Eve knew the 10 Sefirot, easy. Because if you're created, it's like, at what point does a child realize they come from their parents? Very quickly. Within the first 10 years of a 100-year life, they know exactly. And if they've read a dictionary and they've been on a few websites, they know exactly where they come from. Even with their mummy and daddy blushing and going, it was a stork. No, it wasn't. Daddy, we all know what happened. And then daddy's really scared what the child's about to say. So if you're created by God, you know very early in the piece, especially when you're created as a 30-something-year-old, you've already got cognizance, you've got intellectual ability. They knew. But if you know that God created you, unlike us that we sometimes have a problem believing that, and some prefer to not be from God, they prefer to be an accident in the cosmic way that the world works. But if you know that you're from God, I think that comes with a lot of higher knowledge, and therefore I would safely venture to say Adam knew exactly how the world was created. He was still communicating with God in a way that he could consciously digest what he was being told. So he must have known the Sephirotic system. Whether he could spell it out, I don't know. Much like a child knows how to eat, but can they tell you the theory of eating? No, but it's a part of them, so they know it. So it would have been already back then. But in writing Sefer Yetzirah, I don't know if that's our oldest written text. It's one of them, so I don't know exactly.
Who wrote that one?
Sefer Yetzirah could have been written by Avraham Avinu, by Abraham,
right.
But there are definitely sections that they say are from Adam. So, first writing. We know Adam spoke Hebrew, and he knew it had a formation of letters, and because he had to identify the energies of each animal. So we know he understood the concept of words and letters, as opposed to cavemen, who sound was a form of expression, but it couldn't be written. It wasn't a written language, it wasn't a spelt language. Of course, I've just used an analogy for a group of people that may never have existed according to the Torah, but that's okay. You could have, but
Shimon Bar Yochai was a caveman.
Well, true, but he didn't walk around with a club grunting. Although he could have had cavemen even, because we know post-Adam the world degenerated very, very quickly. If cavemen are just an uncivilized form of humanity, they don't have to all be just Homo erectus without anything. They don't have to be non-Homo sapien. But who knows? That's a long time ago, and there's a lot of speculation in the science of history.
Here's a joke when Adam saw the lion. He's on one way to call you. The lion looks back at Adam.
Aria. Good.
This just a thought, but it's nothing to do with the lesson, just about the translation, like translation of the Bible, of everything that loses so much when it's not in the original.
100%. I agree with that a lot. That translation often loses. I always say, open up a Siddur and you'll see how much is lost.
And it's even sometimes not really. I mean, even I look at more even at the appropriateness, so it's not totally.
Well, English is a very inaccurate language. It's a Tiferet language, actually. It's a mix of a whole lot of different languages which produced its own language, and that's a good example, actually. Language. We've got Latin and Greek words, and yet a Greek or a Latin scholar can't understand anything we're saying. You know, go, but what are you talking about? Like 50% of the words I'm using are Greek. You know, what are you? But it's still a Greek person won't understand. And a Latin, and a priest who's been stuck in some dungeon in the Vatican studying the Latin text has no idea what we're saying, even though half our language are rooted in Latin. So Tiferet is this new byproduct of Greek and Latin. So English is not an accurate language at the best of times. A lot of languages have many, many descriptive words, and yet English throws one word. I'll give you an example. Angel. Angel. And yet in Hebrew, you've got malachim, srafim, chais hakodesh, ofanim. You've got dozens of words for different types of angels. And yet we say, you look at the Siddur, the angels sing. Angels. The only thing I get when I think of an angel is a halo and two wings. And yet, when you say Chais HaKodesh, you don't even think wings. Chais HaKodesh, you think of angels with some sort of animal form. You think of Ofanim and you just think of bland formation, a collection without any shape. You think of Srafim and you think of some sort of fiery image. And yet, they're all angels. So English is very inaccurate, so a lot gets lost, and and not only does it get lost, it gets misunderstood. It's interesting, I was just in Loretto last week, Catholic school, Loretto, Mandeville Hall. Mandeville Hall, yeah? So I was there last week, I'm going there this week again, and one of the teachers asked me about certain things. What's the difference between their translation of the Old Testament and the Hebrew, or even our translation, because there are subtle differences. And I say because the translation of the Old Testament has been from Hebrew to English. So already right there you've lost meaning. And then if it's translated by people who have possibly in certain eras of history had a bit of an agenda, they will tend to use a word that fits better. It can still be correct, but it fits. So it's, and also a lot of translations actually are not translations from Hebrew, they're translations from Latin. So it's a translation of a translation. And I just spoke about, there are a couple, I don't even think it makes a difference, the differences to the meaning. But the idea is that the translation is not it. The original, if you look at French poetry, and you look at Russian poetry, not that they're considered holy languages, but they're considered more pure languages. Hebrew isn't the only old language. There are a number of old languages, and the older languages are far more expressive. And yet there's something lost when you take a piece of French literature. I wouldn't have the foggiest idea, but this is what all the snobs tell me, that everything is lost when it gets translated into English. There's something that isn't there. But that's why scholars do study ancient languages, to be able to have that in its raw form. I used to love reading certain periods of Christian history, and if you didn't speak Latin, you couldn't study. How dare you study in a Heintige Loschen, in a current language? You gotta have the original so you can tap in. So the Hebrew, so I say look in the Siddur not just because of the translation, but even in the Siddur you've got a lot of poems. And you don't even know they're poems when you read them in English, because they don't rhyme. Besides not rhyming, they may go in alphabetical order in Hebrew, they don't go in alphabetical order in English. And so you lose a lot of the subtlety and the balance. Also, a lot of combination of words actually have numerical values. You don't have that in the English. So I always tell people in prayer, as you know, I tell people when they come to shul here, say what you want to say, in whatever language you want to do it in. Because for today, that's all you're going to do. But do that knowing full well that the goal is to be able to understand Hebrew and pray in Hebrew. A step up from making up your own prayer is reading the prayers in English, because as creative as we are, the Kabbalists who wrote prayer were far more creative. There is a very precise energy they want us to tap into with these words. So after you finish making it up and you want to use the siddur, do it in English. And then once you're ready to start learning it, do it in Hebrew. Or if you want, you can jump straight into the Hebrew, but then you've got to do a quick smart, also learn a bit of what you're reading. And that's why I like to translate the prayers and explain the prayers so people can have the benefit of reading in Hebrew and kind of understand what they're saying as well, so they can tap into the magic of the words. All right? It's been a good series? Mm-hmm. Yeah?
Just a quick question. We discussed Chesed, Gematria, and Tiferet from a point of view of creation, macro.
Yeah.
But we haven't discussed Chokhmah bin Das from that point of view.
Because Chokhmah bin Das took place before creation. It says that prior to creation, Yisrael ola b'machshava, al payim shana kodma toil olam. 2,000 years, whatever that means, before the world was created, Hashem already had a Torah, as in the notion of the Torah. It also says that before Hashem created, the idea of a people pops into his head. And what's the notion of a people is he had this idea that he would like to create a creation that will think it's independent of God, deny the existence of God quite easily, or choose to believe in God quite easily, and then choose to live a spiritual life. So the goal of creating something that thought it was completely removed from God, which is what humanity is, was God's goal. Then he worked backwards. He says, how am I going to end up with humans? Okay, I'm going to need oxygen. I'm going to need da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm going to have to create a whole system to be able to allow something to feel that removed from me that they actually deny I exist. So that was all the Chokhmah bin Das. That's the intellectual process that God's intellectual process. There was the spark, I want, which everything always starts from. Everything begins with an impulse. The classical, stereotypical case of desire is a pregnant woman's impractical wish or illogical wish. And what's the example always given? The chocolate-coated pickles. It doesn't make sense. Why do you want it? I don't know, but I want it. So the wish is there. Now we've got to go through the process. How are we going to achieve it? Chokhmah bin Das. What is my process of actually thinking it through so I can begin creating? So the intellectual process had to happen after God had a wish, a desire, but before he could begin creating, he needed the intellectual process. Why do we have an intellectual process? This is beautiful. We're not trivializing God. We're making ourselves unbelievable. God goes through Chokhmah bin Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus, and guess who else does? We do, because we were created B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. So of course, everything in this world is going to follow that principle. It's not like, oh, you trivialize God to be human. No, I've made humanity onto the level of God. Kaviyachol, anthropomorphically speaking. We're not God, but we operate in the realm that he created us.
It's nice to think that we have an intellectual process?
A process. Although on the level of Ein Sof there was no process. This is below Ein Sof.
And Keter?
So Keser is even higher than everything. Keser, but when you have Keser in the 10 Sefirot, which means crown, you remove Da'at. You only have Keser, Chokhmah Bina, and then you go Chesed, Gvura. Those two are interchangeable in the... You never have 11, you always have 10, and depending on the framework of what you're dealing with. When we're talking about creation, there's no Keser. When you talk about higher than creation, you include Keser and you move Das. That's a whole... That stuff does my head in.
And the idea that the God is absolute and perfect and doesn't need anything, why there was that idea of creation in the first place?
So really you are a student of Kabbalah. That is one of the fundamental questions that gets discussed. And there's a Yiddish phrase, and that is "Ofatayva mifreknish kankashas." When of a desire, you can't ask any questions. But the fact is, it was there. But there was a higher level where we say there was no desire. On a high level, none of this exists. When you're on a plane and you look down, it's all two-dimensional. When you're in space, it's all two-dimensional. And yet, from our vantage point, we've got the most tall, amazing buildings. So, from our point of view, it's all real. From up there, it's flat. It's not real at all. Now, on even a higher level, none of it even exists. So we are actually not even real. We're not even a desire. Because on another level, we don't even register. But we don't register because we're part of the infinite, and within the infinite there is no such thing as finite, and therefore we don't even really exist. And that's just touching. I don't even understand what I've just said. I always get smiles, that's why I say it. I'll tell you a joke that reminds me of. But that's just touching on what the Kabbalah is discussing. And ultimately, the real Kabbalist, the true master, comes to the awareness that they don't even exist. Now, the joke that I used to tell, and I still remember, my GP, when I was a kid, I remember sitting there. I must have an unbelievable memory, because you don't memorize things that don't make sense. My GP tells my mum, I just heard this awesome joke. My mum says, yeah, go on. Says, 2 bees were flying over a bar mitzvah, and one bee says to the other, quickly, put your yarmulke on. And the other bee says to the one, why should I put a yarmulke on? He goes, because they're going to mistake us for being wasps. So when I was a kid, I was like, I don't get it. Bees are wasps are bees. Later, I started discovering wasps in society and bees and the pun and da-da-da. So I said it, that we're infinite and we don't exist. But I know I'm hungry. I know I've got a wife at home. I know I've got kids. I'm going to kiss my kids before I go to sleep. I'm going to hug my wife. I'm going to eat food, and that's going to be the reality of it all. And God is going to be my abstract that I'm not sure if God, I'm sure, but I'm not sure. That's my belief system. So it's funny, from us, we've got the tallest buildings, and yet from the aeroplane, a building. We're 13,000 meters up in the air.
So by non-existence, you probably mean we're part of the same whole, right? And somewhere on a deeper level, on a higher level, we just one. That's on the energy, right? That's on the level below. That's on the level below what I'm talking about. I'm not joking. On one level, we are like flames in a bonfire, drops of water in an ocean. We're one whole, right? There's no difference really. But on another level, it doesn't even exist. Part of Ein Sof?
Ein Sof, which means infinite, none of this exists. All this exists within only a step lower, Oir Ein Sof, which is the light, and only from the light was there able to be a cholol, which would be an absence of infinite, where finite could exist, where all this could even happen. But the cholol, relative to Ein Sof, never even happened.
Can we have theories on that as well?
Yeah, in the four worlds, we have to go through that.